Everybody has great ideas that they just don't do. Write a book, start a charity or a company, travel the world or run a business. But almost every single time an idea like that comes into one of our minds, we just say no. No, I just wouldn't know where to start. No, my boss wouldn't let me. Or no, I just don't have the resources or the time. But if even one of those times we said yes instead of no, and followed through with our idea, that could be one of the most rewarding and fulfilling things that we ever do. So, I'm going to tell you how to not say no and make your ideas come true. So last year, I had an idea to join the International Genetically Engineered Machines competition, iGEM. iGEM is about coming up with a genetic engineering solution to an existing problem. It's exactly what I'm interested in, and it was just outside my depth, so it's something I really wanted to do. So after some deliberation, I decided to just go for it. And that's the first really important step if you want to make your own idea come true. Take the initiative. Do not say no. Find out exactly what it is that you need to do next to make your idea come true. So for me, that involved looking up online what I needed to do and emailing strangers on the internet who knew far more than I did and asked them for help. I talked to my teachers and my classmates and asked them if they wanted to collaborate with me and if we could build something together. So now it's quite easy to go through the first week or two of your project and have a really good understanding of what you want to do and still kind of be high off the adrenaline of first having your idea. But eventually that adrenaline dies out, and when the first real challenges hit you, you're still going to be in a position where it's very easy to say no. So the second important step when you want to make a project come true is to commit yourself to the idea. Well, and in committing yourself, what you can do is, what I did, is you can find someone else to do it with you. So I have a friend called Jake who's interested in a lot of similar things that I am. And when I told him about the idea and what I wanted to do, and more importantly, why I wanted to do it, he was on board. We were going to do this together. At that point, it was very difficult for me to back out and say no, because if I did, I would not only be failing myself, I'd be failing him. Now, that's something you can do for your own projects, even if it's something that you are doing completely for yourself. If you tell your friends and your family what you're doing, and more importantly, why you're doing it, they'll be committed to help you, and you'll kind of be committed to finish it for them. So after me and Jake could figure out what we wanted to do, we approached our teacher, Mr. Zivanek, who was extremely helpful. And it was really a rewarding thing to do because we expected him to be kind of cautious and say no, but he didn't say no. Instead, he gave us the opportunity and tried to help us figure out what to do next. That was an extremely inspirational moment, and it helped us continue from there. This is when we hit our first big problem, the $4,500 entry fee for this competition. Now this was obviously something that we couldn't do ourselves. We couldn't fund this from our back pocket. Someone out there was going to have to invest in what was essentially the pipe dream of two 16-year-olds and make it come true. We didn't really know what to do. This is at a point where a lot of our teachers said, no, this is not going to work. They told us to say no. But we were in a position where we had committed ourselves to this project and we didn't want to do that. So what we did is we approached our headmistress and we asked her for help. We asked her to say yes with us, so that we could help this project come true. Now, when we planned our pitch, we kind of had one goal in mind. We wanted to walk out of that room, making sure she hadn't said no. She didn't have to say yes, but as long as she didn't say no, that was good. So when we planned our pitch, we tried to figure out a way to get her to understand why we wanted to do it, and try to find some advantages for the school so we could make that come true. And we were incredibly lucky because our school understands the importance of taking the initiative and starting a project like this. So she invested in us and believes in us. At that point, it was impossible to turn back because now the $4,500 of the school's money was counting on us succeeding. This is where we kind of started with the initial stages of the project, and that's where things started to go really, really well. We collaborated with 10 other students and formed a team, and we came up with the initial idea for our project to genetically engineer photosynthetic bacteria to come up with a new solution to solar power. It was incredibly exciting. It sounded so cool. We spent hours a day just researching it and planning sort of the genetic circuits we had to build. It was going really well. But then the summer came and the first real problem started to hit us. It was a stressful time because we had to build our genetic circuit, but we had no idea how. This was the first problem that challenged us with our actual project, and we didn't really know how to tackle it. This was huge. The biggest part of the project was to build a genetic circuit, and we had no idea how to do it. It was very daunting. But what we did, instead of saying no, we took a problem that was very difficult, we broke it into smaller problems. Where do we find our DNA? What bits of the DNA do we need to cut out? How do we stick it back together? And then we took those problems and turned them into even smaller problems, and we kept doing that until every single problem took an hour or maybe a day. It was very easy to not say no to. So once we had done that, we kind of started to get things working, and we actually started building our genetic part. It was very exciting. But at this point, we hit a slightly harder problem to tackle. In order for one of the steps of our genetic modification to work, we had to freeze the bacteria at minus 80 degrees C. Now, no freezer in our school could do this, and we sure as hell couldn't afford one. And there was no way to break this problem down into something more achievable. We were stuck. But here, we pulled out another tool from the problem-solving toolbox, and that's to ask for help. We went to a conference about synthetic biology, and we asked those of biotech company, and when every single one of those said no, we reached out to universities until eventually somebody was willing to help us. Now, this was Imperial University, and they gave us, not only did they give us their freezer, they also gave us invaluable advice. Because they knew so much more about this than we did, they were willing to predict the problems that we were going to have and avoid us from even having them in the first place. In hindsight, that was probably the most important step we took. Even if it hadn't been for the freezer, we probably wouldn't have finished our project if we hadn't taken it. Always, if you're out of your depth, try to find help, because more often than not, there'll be someone out there who's willing. Our final problem that we hit was one that we really couldn't achieve. You see, a genetic part consists of 3 components, something called a promoter, something called a ribosome binding site, and something called the protein coding sequence. So your piece of DNA eventually codes for a protein, but first it has to turn into something called RNA, which is what the promoter does. And then after that, it needs to bind to the ribosome. That's what the ribosome binding site is for. The rest is the protein coding sequence, which is like the 1s and 0s, the A, C, T's, and G's, that tell the ribosome what protein to build. Now, it turned out for 2 of the 4 genetic circuits we built, we completely forgot the ribosome binding site. When we had a little white residue of DNA, it just didn't work. There was no way that we could go back and do it all again. It took us weeks to do this, and we didn't have that long until the end of the competition. We couldn't break this problem down, and we couldn't ask anyone for help. We were stuck. But once again, we had another tool in the problem-solving toolbox of not saying no. And that was to simply sidestep the problem. We realized that we didn't need to solve this problem to finish and to enter the competition. So we didn't really say no, but we didn't really say yes either. So once we had done this and we had made our DNA and we'd tested it, we were on the final stretch of our project. We had to present this project in some way to the judges. And that involved 3 things. That involved making a presentation, involved making a poster, and involved making a website. Now, the poster and presentation were easy. They only took 2 days, even though they were very nerve-wracking, much like this TED Talk. But the website was far, far more difficult. The website took over a month to complete and involved a lot of hard work. This was the problem that we knew exactly how to solve. We had broken it down, we'd asked everyone for help, and we knew what we were doing. The limiting factor here was our motivation. Sometimes we would say no even though we knew what to do. So the art of keeping motivated, I found out, is simply finding out a way to not say no in the future. So for me, that involved planning out rewards after particularly difficult pieces of work. Or that idea of committing yourself. There's certain parts of the project that I promised I would do, and if I didn't do them, I'd be letting everyone down. So it was almost a fear that motivated me to do these. Here, after we kind of got these things sorted, this final sprint was actually ridiculously fulfilling, because we took an idea that was initially in our heads and we saw it manifest itself. And this was a very rewarding process. After we'd finished all of this and we'd finally put in the hard work that we needed to do, came the payoff. We got to go to Boston to present our idea to various people around the world, and we got to see hundreds of other ideas like ours and listen to their stories and listen to what they had done. It was an incredibly interesting thing to do, because we met a lot of people and we had a lot of opportunities that we simply wouldn't have had before. It was very, very rewarding. I would also, despite this conference being so amazing, that's definitely not the most important thing of this project. This project also taught me a lot of things that I didn't have before. I learned a sense of confidence that I wouldn't have got otherwise. I learned ways of problem solving that involved not saying no that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And I had got a deep understanding of the subject of synthetic biology. Because I was so engaged in what I was doing, and I had such a great teacher, I realized that I realized things and I looked at things from perspectives I just wouldn't have had in a classroom or under standard test conditions. So this project was something that I did that I was ridiculously proud of. It's probably the thing that I'm most proud of today. A few years ago, when I was about 13, I had a programming teacher called Arthur who taught me how to program. And he was a ridiculously good teacher because he knew how to get an idea into a student's mind. And he figured out how to get them engaged. But more important was that he encouraged me to start my first project. With him, I created a computer game, and it was the first thing I was really proud of. That's when the seed of not saying no was planted in my mind. Now, recently in this iGEM competition, that seed has grown, and I've realized just the power that this philosophy has. So, in this audience, I implore you, next time that you have a great idea, it's time to take the initiative, not say no, and make your idea come true. Thank you.